Page 185 continued. "You stand here, boy," said Hari from where he sat on his left, "and move that handle with your right hand as I am doing. Whenever the thread breaks, join it quickly with a knot." That Mannu thought was easy. He set to work. At first his hand seemed to move slowly, as if it were afraid. "A little more quickly, brother," said Hari. Now Munnu's hand revolved the handle a bit too fast. The thread broke and he did not know how to tie the knot. The man on his side called to him, "Look, this is the way to tie it." And he deliberately broke the thread and began to tie it. Munnu initiated the movement he had been shown and got it right. He was thrilled to realize that he had learnt his job. End of page 185. Now page 186. Now he could gyrate, G-Y-R-A-T-E, gyrate the handle of the machine to the tempo which dictated it. It was a simple and easy job. The machine seemed to do all the work. He was only moving a handle, while the machine was gathering up the thread and weaving it into a pattern further ahead. It was different work from any that he had ever done. It was delicate, and the eyes had to be kept on the thread all the time. That was a strain, but the novelty of the business interested him, and soon he felt his hand helping the machine just in time and joining broken threads up deftly. The wild hum of the machine, the jigging of its pistons, and the ticking of its knobs, the furious motion of the broad conveyor belts across its wheels, the clanking of chains, the heat they all generated, and the heavy, greasy odor of oil mixed with the taste of the fresh cotton thread, not offensive by itself, but sickening like bile in the mouth. From all this seemed to rise a black shadow, strangling one at the throat with its powerful invisible fingers. Munnu recalled that he had felt somewhat the same feeling in the dark sheds of the weavers in his village, and the black cavern of the oil makers, where the bullock, blinded by leather goggles and a rag, went round and round and round, harnessed to the shaft. And this place seemed not very much unlike the huge flour mill at Daulatpur, where he had borne weights of grain for the fastidious old women who liked their flour fresh. As the morning advanced, however, the resemblance of this inferno to anything he had ever seen began to fade away, for the June sun began to make itself felt, not only through the small ventilator in the east wall, which let in a rectangular stream of light and made the cotton dust above the machine shimmer like the colors of a kaleidoscope, but through the sheets of the corrugated iron that lay darkly aslant on the roof. By noontime, Munru felt the perspiration running down from the top of his head to his face and down to his neck to his body. Being intent on his job, he could not wipe it, and he tried to get used to it, regarding it as a sort of poison which it was good for his body to cast off in liquid shape. Only it was clammy and exuded a warmth which was becoming unbearable. Besides, the streams were trickling into his eyes and falling across the lines of his body onto the drier surfaces. He was irritated and looked around to see how the others fared in their sticky heat. End of page number 186. Now page number 187. The coolies about him had taken off their tunics, and their bare bodies were bathed in oily smears of sweat. He felt he could take off his shirt too, but he did not know how he could do it while his hands were engaged. A whistle blew, and the handles which the coolies wielded refused to work, though the steel wheels on the sides of the main plant continued to roar themselves hoarse. All the coolies were getting up, draining the sweat of their faces with their hands. Munnu got up and walking towards the door for air, began to take off his shirt by crossing his arm and lifting the lapels over his head. The soiled, wrinkled, homespun garment came up to his head and stuck there, as he had forgotten to unbutton it in the front. He struggled to pull it off. The tunic slipped over the left arm and uncovered his eyes, but still stuck on the right arm. A great gust of hot wind that flew by the wheels of the conveyor belt blew the edge of the cloth and tore it into tatters across the wheel that gyrated at 20 miles an hour. Munnu ran for it in a kind of spontaneous despair at his loss. The wrestler Coolie with the broken ears, who had sat on his right, barred his way with a strong arm and a loud curse. "Keep your sense, you bastard. You will lose your life if you do that." Hari rushed up in panic and dragged him away. As he walked out of the room, Munnu felt as if the many-headed, many-armed machine god was chuckling with laughter at the grim joke it had played on him by divesting him of his shirt. When he reached the compound, he did not feel so outraged, because most of the coolies were bare-bodied anyway, and what was more, their faces were encrusted with the deep lines of their wrinkles, the ugly contortion of their furrows, the twisted outlook of the hollows in their cheeks, the pits and mountains of their jaws, while layers of fluff covered their short-cropped hair from their necks to the tips of their ritual tuft knots, their eyebrows, their eyelids, and their eyelashes. "Tiffin time," said Hari, looking utterly ridiculous and sounding quite funny as he whispered the English words by which the midday break was known, since Jimmy Thomas came to the factory and adopted the Anglo-Indian name for what was his lunch hour and a brief space for resting, cooling, breathing, and eating for the coolies. There was nowhere for the coolies working in the factory to, end of page 187, now page 188, wash, except at a pump in the grounds at the back, among huge drums of oil and bales of cotton, where 100 men crowded round to get a drink. There was nowhere to go for a meal, not a canteen, not a cook shop, or even a confectioner's shop. Only a man with 2 baskets of plain roasted gram and cheap sugar-coated stuff sat outside the factory. But the wives of the coolies had, with peculiar female foresight, brought food for their kith and kin, and most of the coolies sat under the thin shade of the palm trees, rolling great big balls of rice in their hands and swallowing them rudely, unceremoniously, as Munnu had never seen people do in the north. "What has happened to my wife?" said Hari, looking at the other folk feeding comfortably, and he rushed away towards the sheds to look. Munnu lay disconsolate and sullen under the scanty shade of a hedge, anxiously waiting, expecting Hari. But the whistle blew, and after waiting till everybody had gone in, Munnu returned to work again by way of the pump, which was now hissing sharply and coolly against the torrid heat of the sun. The stifling heat of the afternoon began to reverberate like an electric shock through his temples when he got inside. His ears sent out waves of heat onto his cheeks. His eyes began to burn with a fiery intensity. His head seemed thick and congested with the thoughtless hardness. His limbs sagged wearily. He felt languid with hunger. He felt a superstitious awe. The Chimta Sahib had brought another coolie to sit in the place where Hari should have been. Munnu did not know what had happened. He sat wearily, mechanically revolving the handle in his hand, with his heartstrings stretched tight in suspense. At length, Hari came rushing, panting and panic-stricken, and said that his little boy had grazed his right arm by ignorantly touching the belt of a machine in the spinning shed. Munnu felt hard and could not sympathize. He just looked blankly into Hari's face and remained dumb, as if now his heartstrings had contracted. "Have you shown him to a doctor?" asked the broken-eared wrestler on his side. End of page 188. Now page 189. "No, brother, not yet," replied Hari, shaking and trembling. "There is no doctor at the mill. The Chimta Sahib has given me leave to take the boy to hospital in town, but of course I will lose my job now. The Sahib is very angry that I have not put in full time on the first day of my work in the weaving shed." Being this disconsolate and broken, weary and pathetically lonely in his despair at not being able to cope with his manifold responsibilities, he made to go. Then, as if he had forgotten something, he returned and said to Munnu, "Brother, when you come, bring the mother of my child home with you. She will not know the way on her own." When Hari had gone, Munnu's heart went out to him. He felt he must go and bear the child on his back to the hospital, because the old man would get tired, trudging through the dust of the half-finished thoroughfares which led from the factory to the town. He could see him go past the iron rails, past the sacks of timber and the rusted steel girders which lay by the upturned earth outside. He could see him walk by the pool where cows and buffaloes would be submerged up to their necks in the murky green water. He could see him cast a glance at their home in the straw hut with the ragged jute cloth hanging, and then get lost in the rottenness and slime on the outskirts of the town below the hide-covered plateau. Munnu did not know where the hospital was, and he could not see Hari except in the hazy desert on the edge of the town. What if the boy died on his shoulder before Hari got there? Munnu felt it would be unbearable to live with Hari and his wife if that happened, because they might connect their misfortune with their association with him. It was good that they did not know that he was an orphan, otherwise they would sure to think that he was an ominous person to have about them. Am I really ominous? He asked himself. My father died when I was born, and then my mother, and I brought misfortune to Prabha, and it seems I have brought misfortune to Hari now. If I am ominous, why don't I die? My death would rid the world of an unlucky person. I would like to die. It was better to be dead. Yes, better to be dead, because the town has turned out wrong, and it is so hot working here, and my aunt's mud hut in the hills was better than the damp straw hut in Sahib's Lane. He felt alone now that Hari was not there, and he had no connection with any of the coolies. The endless deafening noise of the machine got onto his nerves. He felt torn and tattered and shattered, and hunger gnawed at his ribs like a rat. End of page number 189. Now page number 190. A big slimy rat whose very sight was sickening. The demons outside him and in him crowded around his head, diffusing his thought as the collision of waves diffuses the water into froth. The tiny skiff of his soul tossed to and fro on the soft sun-speckled edge of his form, as if it were a small point struggling in vain to cross the river, and as if it were threatened with extinction or by an foreseen storm. The visions of the gay bazaars with their mixed population of superior sahibs and rich merchants and poor men, the pictures of gigantic wonderful houses in the town, of the tall houses in the workers' colony, the view even of the factory in which he was enclosed, cast the glamour of the strange as yet unknown about him. The illusion gathered force from the sound of the money the Chimta Sahib had fixed as his pay, more money than he had ever earned, from the feel of all the desirable things that he thought he would buy with it: black boots, a watch and a chain, a polo topper, shorts, a tunic, and all paraphernalia of sahibhood. But these were secret wishes, secret hopes, not to be spoiled by looking at. Yes, yes, he said to himself, to ensure the safety of these thoughts. And again he reached out to life, the joy of life which registered in his mind's eye, the clear hieroglyphs of numerous desires. I want to live, I want to know, I want to work this machine. He said, I shall grow up and be a man, a strong man like the wrestler. He looked towards the wrestler, and as if his thoughts had been actually talking to the broken-eared coolie, he heard him say, my name is Ratan. I come from Punjab. You look as if you are a hillman. That is so, but I worked in the plains at Shamnagar and Daulatpur. We be compatriots then. What is your name? Munnu, the boy replied, and he could not help admiring the frank, open look in the man's face, and it felt he was not alone. But exactly when he had begun to feel at home with the whistle blew, and panting, fuming, hoarse and excited, the machines came to a standstill. The coolies rushed as if they were tigers who had scented flesh from afar. Munnu entered the spinning shed on his way out. It was full of women with babies tied to their backs, in their laps, or wallowing in the dust on the floor, crying, screaming, sobbing. End of page 190. Now page 191. Precariously perched near the claws of the machine which sifted cotton on the far side of the shredded steel planes, pistons and steam, Munnu wondered that all the children had not grazed their arms, knocked their heads, or been cut up into pieces by the parts of the machine which jutted out, without any wiring to keep them safe out of harm's way. Lakshmi was weeping when Munnu found her. He could not weep, but felt embarrassed and ill at ease as they walked away together. By the factory clock above Nadir Khan's head, 11 hours had elapsed since they had entered the factory. Munnu figured. The vertical sun had already gone down, and the darkness of twilight spread like dirty linen hanging out on the Milky Way. A strange humidity had overtaken Bombay, with the tense oppression of grey clouds that rolled heavy-footed across the heavens to India's farthest plains. The afternoon of Saturday was a half-holiday even for the coolies. Hari had to bear his son to the hospital in town to get his arm dressed again. Lakshmi wanted to look at the shops, and Munnu was eager to see the wonders of civilization. So they all walked down to the city on the afternoon of Saturday. As the little troop wended its way among the crowds of other coolies who were off on a binge at the toddy shops or for a razzle in Grant Road, a vague, sulky heat around the dusty earth which spread in a brown amber desolation filled the atmosphere, and gigantic crowds stalked the sky from south to north. Munnu looked at the heavens, bewildered by the phenomenon. Then he looked down again, gasping for breath, staring sideways for a cool spot in the foggy haze, and thankful that he had not a kami shirt sticking on to his skin in the torrid heat of this breathless day. A blast of cool, sharp air struck him at the corner of the hospital. He could not see who had plunged the sudden dagger into the heart of the hill. They had to wait in the outpatients ward before the boy was attended to, but Hari had long since learnt to be patient. Lakshmi completely effaced herself. The little girl was excited, while the boy stared blankly at the world from his father's lap. Munnu alone was. End of page number 191, now page number 192. Conscious of the heavy atmosphere of the waiting room, Munnu, charged with the pungent smell of strange medicines, and by the superior grace of the beautiful pink nurses who seemed to walk like electricity and talk like nightingales. He got up from this hot corner of the last row of benches where he had taken a seat, while Hari and his family had sat down on the cemented floor. There was an electric fan on top of the first row where he thought the air would be less stale. He walked to it and sat down on the edge of the bench. A sick merchant in muslin who sat there moved away and pressed his weight on the patients next to him. A nurse who was leisurely writing the names of the patients on a register at a small table adjacent arose, stepped up to where Munnu had taken his seat, and frowning so that her face was covered with lines, hissed, "Jao." Munnu retreated, embarrassed and blushing. He was ashamed to look at Hari and the other coolies who sat on the floor, although they were merely listless and did not care whether he was insulted or not, and he walked out of the waiting room into the passage. At the entrance of the outpatients ward, he could hear the sonorous gurgling of what he guessed was the Arabian Sea not far away. He ran to the end of the street, and there, past a slanting bench, he could see the agitated waves roaring onwards, prancing with angry, frothing white horses. The violence with which they broke their knees across the beach and fell back, dazed and wounded, gripped him, and he stood motionless. Then suddenly a distant peal of thunder tore at the heart of the sky and scribbled vivid flashes of lightning. As the earth seemed to shake and the elements to reverberate with a weird agitation, Munnu was chilled and ran for safety back towards the hospital. Hari's little girl greeted him with childish glee, pointed to a lone kite that soared across the sky, flapping its wings up and down, struggling against the wind which was too strong for it. But Munnu was troubled by the darkened skies from which descended sheets upon sheet of blazing light, followed with terrific suddenness by deafening roars of thunder. He dragged the child in. He met Lakshmi and Hari with the boy in his arms coming out. Hardly had they returned to the street where the oil lamps burned with fiery heat and steam oozed out of the pans in a cook shop. End of page 192, now page 193. When there was a hysterical growling in the sky, as if a pack of lions were at war with demonic elephants, and then there was a mad charge of wildly neighing horses whose steel hooves struck fire on the cobblestones of the heaven's surface as their riders, driving the shafts of their spears into their prey, surge caused large drops of rain to fall like cold blood from the injured bodies of 100 beasts. The rain fell, long, sharp, sudden, vertical, solid rains, vast and increasing. It flooded the thirsty land with a terrific sweep of pent-up energy, so that neither man nor beast could stir. 2 hours later, when the bubbles did not explode quite so quickly on the road, Hari led his cavalcade back to the basti in pelting rain. The roads were like rivers. The plain outside the city was a lake, and the tank had overflowed and washed away the straw huts. Drenched to the skin, soaking wet, trembling with fear at the wild noise of the rain, the sudden drops of gurgling thunder, the sharp tearing rents of bright white-red lightning overhead, the uncertain earth of the mill land under their feet. The family sought shelter under a grove of plantain and palm trees, which stood upon a hill surrounding the temple at the edge of the pond. Hundreds of other workers whose huts had been damaged by the monsoon were gathering in the darkness. Ram Ram, muttered Hari in the long drawn out accents as he had the way. Munnu followed quickly. Lakshmi shivered with the vibrations of the elephants. The children moaned and sobbed. Oye Munnu, Oye Mundu. A hoarse voice suddenly fell on Munnu's ears as he went under the weight of Hari's daughter on his back. He was occupied by the memories of the flood as it used to come in his village, and the delights it brought. For his mother fried sweet pancakes to celebrate the season of the rains. So he was not aware of the call. Oye Mundu, the voice came again, heavy, hilarious and familiar. Who could it be? Munnu wondered as he steadied his gait and looked round, exploring the dark. O seducer of your daughter, came the friendly voice near at hand. Wait, I can help you if your hut has been washed away and you want accommodation. End of page 193. Now page 194. Munnu recognized Ratan, the wrestler, who was his neighbor at the factory. He waited. One. Stop. Wait. Came the voice, happy and guttural, and the figure of Ratan towered over him, laughing and slipping. Hari bent beneath the weight of his son on his shoulder. Lakshmi, still and beautiful and poignant as she struggled to sustain her frail form, modestly assimilating the clothes which stuck to her bust and her legs like the folds of drapery around the ancient sculpture, were both too cold and miserable to wait for the voice in the dark. Stay, Hari brother, shouted Munnu eagerly, turning round. Here is Ratan. But as he looked at Ratan, he saw a wild light in his eyes, the deep flush of a broad grin on his cheeks, the faint smell of wine on his thick lips, and he was afraid lest the man was trifling, playing some practical joke, since the wrestler was usually very hearty and frivolous in the factory. His nervousness and trepidation increased as he saw Hari and Lakshmi look back towards him, and as Ratan burst out chuckling with a delight at the ridiculous sight they presented, struggling to keep themselves from slipping in the mud and slush of the pathway. Come to our chawl, said the wrestler, thumping Munnu on the shoulder with a bonhomie which seemed to become more dangerous. Come, come, he bawled out. Come, you seducers of your daughters, you wretches, come. I know you have nowhere to go, but I am with Hari and his family. Come, come all of you, roared Ratan. Ratan, drunk and generous. You miserable beggars, I know how hard it is to fight for a wage in this cursed world and then to have nowhere to go. Nowhere but a toddy shop. Ha ha ha. Come, you swine, I will take care of you. Trust old Ratan, trust the Rustam of Hindustan to guard you. Trust the mightiest wrestler in the world. And as he thumped his chest vigorously to confirm the loud boast, he slipped and fell with a curse. O seducer of his daughter, this rain, God has been passing water. That's what it is. He has been pissing. He heard his body 2 or 3 times and arose at length, apologizing with hiccups. Forgive me, the old Ratan. He is slightly drunk, but he is safe. He is quite safe. Don't be afraid. He will take you to a nice place and slipping, walking, stepping up precariously, dangerously, he led the way. End of page number 194. Page number 195. Munnu waved his arm to Hari, who stood dubious and afraid. Come, all of you, assured Ratan in a more normal way. Trust the Ratan of Hind, the Rustam of Hind, to help him in his time of trouble. Munnu ran up to Hari and dragged him back. They followed the great comic figure of the wrestler. The boy had somehow sensed Ratan's open, frank nature, where the Southerners were hesitant and full of doubts and misgivings. Is it true that Ratan has space for us in the room where he lives? Hari said, as he quickened his steps into short capers. Come, you poor wretches, urged Ratan, with a sincerity that broke through his throat. Come. The procession slipped, walked and jumped past the ditches, struggled through the desolate loneliness of the dark, uneven mainland, haunted now by sharp cries and now by the wail of the wild Chabhul. The procession slid, walked and jumped past ditches, struggled through the desolate loneliness of the dark, uneven mainland, haunted now by the sharp eyes, now by the wild sound of the tom-toms, which kept time with the drifting swish of increasing rain, with the flashes of lightning and the thunder in the sky. Each one of them fell with a resounding thud in turn, and some of these stumbled, and the 3 of them stumbled simultaneously. But they helped each other, at all numb with cold and fear, except Ratan, who, though now reticent, was still warm and hearty, and urged them on till they reached the foot of the tall tenement house, whose 3 lanes away from the straw hut which they had occupied.